It's been another busy week in South Africa, from the search for Thuli Madonsela's replacement for the public protector post to the hawks circling around Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Now we have Melanie Melhar, who's with us from Brand's Eye, to take us through the data and the insights from this week's social media activity. Thanks so much, Melanie, for joining us again. Let's start off with the public protector conversation. I mean, put this into context. How significant was it, and what were the big themes that were coming through?
Yes, so we started listening after the 14 candidates were obviously shortlisted to the 5 left, and we just wanted to see whether the public, where their thinking was going on who it should be, and then obviously when it was announced, to see if you know, they got it right. Lots of conversation around it, and just the themes were you know, around each candidate on their pros and their cons, for lack of a better statement. As you can see there, they got it right. The public again got it right in terms of Advocate Mkhwebane being the most positive sentiment going towards her, and then Judge Desai sitting with the most negative sentiment.
Would there be a correlation between the conversation that we're seeing here in terms of sentiment per candidate with actually their share of voice as well? And that's the next graph that comes up.
Yeah, you can see there is actually no correlation in terms of unless you look at Mkhwebane, she had the most conversation and it was the most positive. But if you look at Judge Desai, he was third in terms of conversation share, but had the most negative. So not necessarily correlation on that end, but just the most conversation about the two that were the favourites.
And of course, Mkhwebane did generate quite a bit of conversation, and I know that there's a word cloud that's going to come up in a second, but the citizens seem pretty impressed with just her qualifications, but also just by her ability to carry herself in a very tough conversation.
Yeah, this was actually specific to Advocate Mkhwebane. They were impressed with her, and that word came up quite a lot. That she is impressive, she carried herself well. They were impressed with her qualifications. They really liked the previous interview she had done with Chester Missing as well. So she had kind of built up her, her nice reputation, if I can put it that way. So they definitely liked her. And
let's pull up Professor Majola, which was also a big conversation. Here, we're looking at about 41.4% in terms of the sentiment. Again, the key themes from this conversation?
So they really liked him because of him coming across as being very humble, which they really enjoyed. Conversation coming from Floyd Shivambu on him and how he doesn't support Professor Majola at all. There's a lot of conversation on that end. A lot of people also kind of sympathized with him because he was supposed to talk before, I think, 11 p.m. and because of disruptions in the morning, he only spoke at 2 a.m. And a lot of people wondered how was he affected by that, and was the committee affected by that? Were they just as tired as he was probably, and did they hear his message correctly?
What I didn't understand was just the rush to have everything done within that time frame, as if this thing had just sprung on us. And again, I probably empathize with a lot of those views around at 2 a.m. Are you still getting the best of the judging panel and still giving the best of yourself? Judge Rina?
So there was a lot of conversation on her end around her focus on tenders and the corruption side of that. People still believe that the tender system is completely corrupt and it's just something for the politicians to line their pockets. A lot of conversation. The word white came up quite a lot, as in white privilege, and people were saying just because she's white you can't trust her. Those types of conversations came up. A lot of conversation around the apartheid came up because she said she tried, she worked against apartheid back in the day. And then also the Corruption Watch hashtag, Buya Mzansi.
Buya Mzansi.
That one. Came up quite a lot, obviously with the corruption links, and that's the movement of the Corruption Watch, to make sure that this is all transparent and done in the right way.
Judge Desai, as we work through them systematically, interesting themes of conversation there.
Yeah, and negative conversation. The whole conversation on his end was around the rape allegations that he has, against him. But it's not necessarily about the allegations. It was more about how he handled questions around it and how he handled questions around Kwezi. He actually kind of stayed away from it. And because of that, Floyd Shivambu actually made a statement that he doesn't have the temperament to be public protector,
absolutely.
so he shouldn't be.
And of course, Judge Mkhwebane is, the conversation there must have been really interesting because social media had actually already indicated that she was a front runner.
Yeah, they called it. They're really impressed with her. Some of the MPs said that she was a lady with guts.
Yeah.
That was the IFP's MP, actually. The ANC MP said she's a woman with a strong mind, or a fine brain, I think was actually
And
what
I would
mentioned.
suspect that there would have been lots of references to Thuli Madonsela as well, because she's the natural comparison in this context.
There was actually more conversation around her than there was around the actual candidates. And that conversation was around her being the next female South African president, mostly.
Wow, that's an interesting one. As we talk about the presidency, let's go to our trend for this week as we get into the conversation around the Hawks and Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan. So the big conversation, of course, was political. I mean, we've been talking about this conversation from the beginning of the show. How did it show up on social media?
I was listening to you earlier, and it is really a case of everyone being behind Pravin Gordhan. They really support him in this. Social media was asking, why is he being investigated when our president has over 700 corruption allegations against him? People also said he probably has something on President Zuma in terms of those corruption cases. So it's his way of criminalizing Pravin Gordhan almost, and kind of getting him out of the way. The coincidence of it coming 20 days after Pravin Gordhan asking for a new SAA board was also questioned quite often. ANC supporters are not loving this. They believe that this will push support from the ANC to the DA and the EFF in the next in the next elections. There was a very small group of people who believed that if he's got nothing to hide, no one's above the law, he should cooperate. But that was definitely the minority of conversation coming through.
And it will be interesting because it will be a conversation that will continue to hold most likely into the coming days as the whole saga unfolds. But as we are seeing there, more tweets coming through. It certainly was a huge conversation that also went right to the core of just like the issues and tensions within the ANC itself.
Yeah, people are just seeing this as another way of being corrupt and furthering corruption in our country.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
And we're seeing, of course, we are seeing the impact on the markets, the banking index down. We were talking about the rand earlier on. And so I would suspect that the market impact is also a big thing that at least market-leaning views or tweeters might have picked up on.
It's a case where everyone is affected by this in their daily business, and they will be vocal about it, and they will be emotive about it. And social media is a place to do that. So yes, the conversation will go on, and we'll keep tracking.
If it's vocal and if it's emotive, you're most likely to find it on social media. That's how we wrap up our Brand's Eye media conversation to Melanie Melharba. She's head of client engagement at Brand's Eye. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. And that's how we close the live segment of Business This Week. Thank you so much for a lovely couple of months. David Williams not in today, but certainly sharing our sentiments on a fantastic show. Brought to you, of course, by our ever-flamboyant producer, Karabo Litlatla. From ourselves and the team, thank you so much for joining us. It's cheers.